The month of printmaking is a biennial Colorado event celebrating the fine art of printmaking, sponsored by the Invisible Museum. I'm Terry Talty, and I want to welcome you to listen to a few of the participants of the first edition of MoPrint, held in 2014. We're talking to Joe Higgins. He's a printmaker in Denver. Joe, can you just tell us a little bit about the process that you use to make this print that's in this show?
Yeah, it's a plexiglass plate. I use brayers to apply ink in 2 to 3 layers, 2 to 3 runs through the press, typically. And I cut out mylar strips that for different shapes and move those around, arrange them in a way that seems attractive, and can even move them around between the various layers and create different effects by allowing the other layers to show through, the older layers.
So this work is figurative. It's a landscape with a figure in it, and you used cut-out shapes to make the figure also?
Yeah, I took a certain amount of stock characters, I guess I'll call them, and shapes, and then I just manipulate them by flipping them back and forth and moving them around and coloring different colors onto them, inking different patterns, and it gives me a lot of flexibility in the imagery, but it also gives me kind of a hard-edged, kind of a poppy look. Very thin mylar, and is intended to kind of interplay with the ink that's actually sitting on the plate, so that it can be a stencil, it can be an applique, it can be kind of a stamping or a collage type of effect.
Okay, so and the technical term for it is a monotype, meaning you do just one at a time.
Yeah, and one of the characteristics of monotypes that I really like is that you can get a ghost print, and that is a second impression of a monotype. It's not the same because most of the ink is gone, but it creates a kind of a soft, misty effect that sometimes shines through the succeeding layers.
So that ghost print is part of one of the 2 or 3 layers you're doing?
Yep. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'll start with the ghost print as the first layer and then build on top of that. That did occur here. That it was a situation where I have another print, a first impression of this image, or I should say the first layer of this image. Then I took that ghost of that first as the first layer of this image and built up a different image on top of that ghost. And it sounds complex, but essentially I take a soft impression of that other image and then use it to create a new image.
So how long does it take to make something like this?
I guess about 6 to 7 hours sticks in my mind for this one. I mean, I was working on 2 at the same time, as I kind of alluded to, but this one came the second, and so I suppose it was probably 3 hours.
Okay, great. And why was this one chosen for this show, the 25 years of Open Press?
I used the monotype and the ghost as kind of a way forward. I picked the one I like the best, and it often is the one that has the misty, kind of ghosty look to it. And then I pursue that, and because the colors are softer and they seem to be in harmony with the colors that I laid on top, and also being the second print, I think I just kind of refined the imagery enough that I liked it, and this is the one we went with.
Good. And for this show, it's 25 years that Open Press has been operating in Denver. Has the nature of printmaking changed? I know you've been making prints all that time too. Has printmaking changed, and how has it changed in 25 years?
From my perspective, not only has there been new and probably simpler, or, well, not simple, but possibly easier to access technologies coming online, like polymer etching, solar plate, so to speak. But from my perspective, it's kind of opened up to a more modernist and experimental interpretation. I mean, I think that when I started doing monotypes, there were a more painterly, there was a very painterly approach to monotypes that seemed to be dominant. And now I think people are really experimenting with it in terms of adding collage-y type of elements and other
And when
elements.
you say painterly, sometimes they look like finger paintings?
Yeah, like, or just broad abstract expressionist brush strokes. That sticks in my mind from some of the books and the exhibits I've seen. Whereas now I think people are starting to experiment with more of a collage, more of a harder edged look, and that's certainly what I favor.
And so how has your imagery changed over that time?
I definitely did. I used to do a more simple positive, negative space with oftentimes drawing into black areas and allowing color to show through. And I think they were a bit more elemental. Now, as I say, I think I'm looking for a more harder edged, almost pop sort of imagery.
Is it important that they're narrative? I mean, that they have...
Yeah, I do believe in narrative. I believe that there's a narrative in any image, whether it's abstract or not. And I believe that some things probably approach the viewer and draw the viewer in, whereas some things recede and maybe ask the viewer to question what is the narrative. Yeah, I think so.
And these, are they, I think they've got somewhat religious titles, don't they?
Well, they actually allude to not only religion, but also mythology and even pop mythology, such as superheroes. Now, this picture actually has a sex worker in a tree, and it has a superhero flying overhead, and it has a Maenad from the Greek mythology, the followers of Dionysus dancing in the lower center. And so I've been doing that lately. That's been something that kind of tickles my fancy, is that I am trying to kind of a Marvel Comics meets Greek mythology sort of thing, and I don't know, playing with the various roles that you expect from these, in this case, these are female roles, I guess I'm exploring, but I like juxtaposing those.
And printmaking, you know, in part of the history of printmaking are things like posters, propaganda.
Right.
It fits with that. Is there a particular reason that you've made this as a print rather than just as a painting or a colored drawing?
Yeah, there is a real spontaneity and a real presence in printmaking, in the sense that you have to be, with a monotype especially, I think you do tend to be present in the moment, and so you get a lot of spontaneous effects that I think you have to embrace. Also, as you alluded to, I do like that bold graphic look that I don't think you get anywhere else but printmaking. That sort of propaganda poster or even travel poster type of look. Or even Toulouse-Lautrec, he'd be a nice example of a more painterly approach. And yeah, in general, I just think there's more things you can do with printmaking you can't do anywhere else, and that it has an exciting feel to it.
The monoprint is not exactly multiples, but is there a reason that you would want to recreate, like you said, this cast of characters? Is there a reason to do multiple things?
I do series of things for sure. Once I get a subject matter that appeals to me, I do tend to try to approach it from different ways of seeing. And
why would that be important to the viewer, that there's more than one? It's not just the one painting, the one Starry Night.
I like the progressions. Technically speaking, a monotype, the way I work with in pulling a first impression and then quickly switching over to the ghost, it kind of creates a sort of dual creative path where you're not attempting something and then just returning to the drawing board. You're actually starting to branch out. And I feel that that can create a little bit of a transference from the technical side of printmaking over to the creative side, and that you're kind of subverting your technical impulses.
And so the viewer's seeing a progression.
You're seeing a progression, and
thinking.
there are surprises even to me, the artist, and hopefully there will be surprises and some very fresh imagery in the monotype as it progresses through its various stages.
Oh, okay, good. And is there anything else that you've learned in the last 25 years about printmaking?
To expect failure. You get to make anywhere from 2 to 5 monotypes in a single day, so that's great. But not all of them are going to be something you're going to want to show to the general public, and then again, that's where the ghost comes in, because then if the first one is a disappointment to you, then you always have a way forward, and that's what I like about printmaking. I think with painting and drawing, you often progress in increments or stages, and you pretty much have the same image in your mind the whole time through. Whereas with monotypes, I think the way I work it, I don't necessarily have any clue as to where I'm headed. And so I've learned to kind of embrace that. I mean, it gets run through a press, 5,000 square pounds of pressure per square inch, and you're not totally in control of what happens, even up to the very end, and I think that's a little bit exciting.
Good, yeah, that there's that mechanism between you and the final product.
Yeah, you're not, the painters, they don't put the canvas through the 5,000 pounds of pressure.
Right.
They finish it and then they frame it.
Yeah, they're not embracing the possible accident.
It's reversed. It's a very simple fact, but it's one that has major repercussions for your right brain, left brain dichotomy. Your creative progressions. What you get is literally backwards from what you pictured.
So you then, as the artist, get to step back and be the viewer, and you're kind of the first viewer.
Yeah, and you're also the first
critic.
The first critic, right?
Yeah. There's that painter that paints things upside down.
Right.
Yeah.
Boslitz. Yeah, I think that's one of the very same things. I think he tries to subvert the literalness of his vision, and that's certainly, I think, one thing you can do in monotype, in any form of printmaking.
Well, great. Thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you.